Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talking Deals with David. Today, I'm joined by Nausheen Chen and Desiree Moore. Nausheen, Desiree, welcome.
Thank
Hi,
you.
David. Thanks so much for
Hi.
having us.
Hi. I mean, I've been saying, as I've been posting about this, I've been super excited. I forget, Nausheen, when we sort of scheduled this. And then I think at some point after that, I was able successfully to kind of rope in Desiree. She probably didn't. I don't know if you knew kind of what you were getting into, but I'm really happy that you decided to join us. Otherwise, it would have just been the two of us.
I'm so glad you asked me. I had been watching your LinkedIn post with interest, so I feel honored to have been roped in.
Oh, that's great. No, I'm happy about that. Well, Nausheen, I mean, I kind of, I think, reached out to you on LinkedIn, which again was another like great benefit. People often ask me, is there a benefit to doing one of these, LinkedIn Live things? Why are you posting so much and sort of spending a lot of time, kind of talking about M&A and what you do, but and there are a lot of benefits, but I think one of them is I came across some of the videos that I think you were doing on LinkedIn, and it just opened up like a huge treasure trove of stuff from your TEDx talks to the writings that you're doing on LinkedIn, and so I think I just reached out to you, and you were gracious enough to get back to me, so it was just awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for reaching out. And I loved that you did. I love that you're creating this community. And LinkedIn is such a powerful tool. And I love that you're really taking advantage of it to first, increase awareness about what you're doing and then the industry and making it less boring and more accessible.
Well, I hope so. I mean, I think you definitely have that down. We were talking before we got on about the great, backdrop that you have that I love. I'm trying to get something like that. I just have to figure out, am I allowed to put that in my house? I need to be retractable so that it doesn't look, crazy when people come in. But I think it would be great. It really looks, awesome, and it kind of keeps with your brand. But Desiree, I was talking actually before you got on with Nausheen about your practice, and I think it's awesome, which is why I sort of thought this would be a good mix. You do a mix of crisis communication, PR, social media. Maybe tell us a little bit about sort of what your focus is in at KNO.
Sure, I think it dovetails so nicely with your topic, communicating with impact. So happy to talk about it. So I'm a litigator by background and training. I started as a young associate in my firm where I still work and did traditional commercial litigation. And over time, a couple of things happened. One, in 2012, I wrote a book for law students and new lawyers about how to succeed in a law firm environment. It was published by the American Bar Association. And it's called Thrive. And when Thrive came out, 2012 was really the early days of using social media for business purposes. And the ABA was a perfect platform for my book, but like any publishing house, they don't necessarily have a massive marketing arm that can drive book sales single-handedly. And so I started to use Twitter at the time and Facebook to talk about my book and share kind of key points from the book that I thought would be of interest to my particular audience, and really began to understand how to leverage social media for business. And I thought, like, all of our clients are going to have this need. Every single one of our clients over time is going to be using social media for business if they aren't already. And so how can I, as an attorney, help clients orient to the platform, understand what they're navigating as they're on the platform? So that was one thing that started to percolate. Equally, and I think this will resonate with many who listen into this discussion, I felt I was a very good litigator. I had training from some of the best litigators in our firm and in the country, but it would be years before I could convince a board or a CEO to give their bet the company litigation to me. Particularly at the time, this was about 10 years ago. A younger female attorney is not going to get the bet the company litigation over a 60-year-old, seasoned trial attorney. And particularly a male attorney. That's just the reality. And I didn't want to sit in a position where I was spinning my wheels for years and years and years until that materialized. I wanted to make things happen now. And so I thought, okay, I'm starting to really understand social platforms. I will always have my litigation background, and I do still litigate quite a bit. But what can I do? How can I create a practice, and how can I critically communicate about the kind of practice that I'm creating so that it's additive, so that people understand it's something a little bit new and it's a little bit different. So I started our social media practice group. That was the initial kind of configuration of the work that I was doing. And over time, people came to me, yes, with front end questions like social media policies for their employees and what does it mean if we're agreeing to these terms and conditions. But more importantly, people were coming to me with questions about crises in the digital space. Somebody is posing as me, infringing my brand online. They are making false and defamatory statements about me online. And my practice has spun in this direction. We've had a cyber intruder and they're posting our information to the dark web. Can you help? And so over time, the social media practice became essentially a crisis management practice. How can we best help clients on the front end prepare for a crisis? And if they're in a crisis, how do they manage it? How do we navigate to the end? What are the legal implications, including regulatory implications, contractual implications, and then also what are the sort of PR type implications, and how do we bring that all together? So that's the evolution of my practice, and I think I've landed in a place just at the intersection of where everyone is right now: digital, image, branding, leveraging platforms to grow. It all comes together in a crisis management practice.
Yeah, it's really amazing and interesting kind of, and we were talking about that before we got on, kind of the intentionality of, pursuing something that you like that intersected, with things that you knew about and that you were interested in, but that also served, a demand, a market need. So kind of being receptive, I guess, to, where you thought law and your interests were going. So I think that was really awesome. Now, Nausheen, I am interested in all these kind of background things, because to me, one of the things I've been thinking about, and I think you kind of got me, going down this road, is that, to be an impactful speaker, which I love that term, because it sort of conveys a force. It has, I like
Mhm.
saying it, and I just sort of like writing it. It sort of has that, weight to it. And I know you use that a lot. Of how do you speak with impact? How do you sort of make a difference when you're communicating? And I wonder, your background is just, off the charts, kind of cool, I guess I would say. It's all, if I missed something, let me know. But you worked at sort of Procter and Gamble, kind of a big company. You did theater. I think I remember somewhere in there, stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Okay, so stand-up
Yes. And
comedy.
improv.
Yeah, improv, theater. So you have a lot of that, I guess I would say, kind of, I don't know if the right thing is extroverted, but certainly, a public facing
Mhm.
kind of interest with all of those. How did you finally make the decision to, I guess, transition away? Oh, filmmaker. That was another one. Filmmaker,
Yeah.
video, all videos, right? All those. So it's really just a huge, different, really cool things that you did. But how did you kind of go through that and decide to focus on leadership communication, public speaking, your TED Talks? Take us through that a little
Mhm.
bit.
Yeah. So, you know that annoying kid who gets up on stage at family reunions and recites the most boring poem? So, I was that annoying kid. I have loved getting up on stage and performing things ever since I can remember. Since the first time I was Rapunzel, I think in my school play. But it just took me a really long time to realize that that was my calling in life. And I say really long time, it's subjective. I'm going to be turning 40 this year. So not that long, but long enough for me to realize. My roots were in the corporate world, like you said. My first job was at Procter and Gamble. It was pretty much the best first job anyone could ask for. I had amazing bosses, just a great work environment. It was very multicultural in the sense that even though we were very homogenous within Pakistan, we traveled a lot and we were very much part of this American Procter and Gamble culture. And after that, I took a break and just did all of those things that you talked about. So I meandered into improv. It was never the plan. Theater and stand-up comedy and film, they were never part of the plan because I didn't have a plan in the first place. But even if I did, they were not part of the plan. But meandered into it, I did. And I ended up going to film school in New York. I went to the new school, did my master's, learned everything there was to learn about filmmaking, everything that I could learn about filmmaking in 2 years, and then created this small video production company in China where we created commercials for Asian clients for 7 years. And it just sounds incredible saying it out loud because it was such a long time to be doing something that I wasn't convinced was what I was meant to do. And this once, one of the documentaries I was working on had been accepted into this film festival in Tenerife in Spain. And I had to get up in front of a room full of investors and TV stations, TV producers, film producers, and present my film to them. So I got up, I gave a little talk about what this documentary was going to be about, and I showed them the trailer. And later, I had these producers from this TV station come up to me and say, "Your presentation was amazing. You painted such a great picture for us. We were so looking forward to seeing your trailer. And then your trailer sucked." And that should have been the first indication that speaking is where your future is, Nausheen, not making
Right.
these films. But it took me another few years of directing commercials and producing commercials to actually get there, almost burning out and realizing that I didn't hate filmmaking. There were parts of it that I loved, and those parts were working with on-screen talent. So very often, of course, I was working with actors, but also I was working with these CEOs who were speaking on camera for the first time. They had no idea of how to like really present themselves, really show their true selves on camera, and they would freeze. They would show this very watered down version of themselves. They would bore audiences. And that was just not on if you want to create like a snappy 3-minute commercial with the CEO coming on at the end and saying, "This is my story and I would love for you to join us." A lot of these were, these kinds of crowdfunding campaigns. So they weren't your traditional commercials, but more like product launch keynotes. So I was helping these CEOs speak on camera, and I realized this is what really gives me energy. This part of the process is what I love. I just didn't like the other parts. So I took all of that away and I focused on training and coaching people to show up as their best selves on camera and on stage.
Well, and your energy, because people may not realize you're in China, so it's 11:13 p.m. I mean, I can't imagine what the energy level would be if it was normal, business hours that you're talking. So you have that. Desiree, were you that same child on stage, trying to get the spotlight on you, or were you different than that?
So I love that question. No one's ever asked me that, but I was a little bit different. And interestingly, my son is exactly like this. And I feel like I'm the only person who gets it. I always had the biggest ideas, and everybody was like, "That's impossible. What are you talking about?" All the time as a kid. Like I would come back from an amusement park and be like, "Okay, we need to go." There wasn't Home Depot then, but let's say Home Depot, right? Like to just ad lib. We need to go to Home Depot and buy wood and metals. I want to create, I want to build a roller coaster. Like it wasn't like that was fun and I want to go again. It was like, no, I want to be the next Walt Disney. Like I just always wanted to create things, and that has never stopped. Only now in adulthood, I get to do it, and no one can tell me that that's ridiculous and impossible. Because always inside I was like, no, there's something better than this. There's a next level. There's something more to be doing. Right, write a story in class, and I can think back to some of these stories, and the teachers would be like, "Where'd you come up with?" Like kind of cynical about it almost, instead of being like, "Wow, this is." I'm sure it wasn't great. That's really not the point. But I think I really would have benefited from someone who saw me and said, yes, this is a great seed of an idea. Let's keep going with this. Or I love that you're thinking this way, instead of like, no, nobody does that. Or that's impossible. You can't write a novel in a weekend. Fine, true, very true. But how about, like, I love that you want to write a novel. Like, let's go with this. Let's set up some goals, right? Like, so I think I'm answering this question in a lot of different ways because it makes me think of so many things. But I wasn't on stage, but I was constantly, the wheels were turning about ideas and things to make and create. And even within the confines of a law firm, which are generally fairly predetermined, right? Like, you pick a practice group and you do that thing the way that the people before you have done it until you retire, or maybe you take a job in-house, right? But there are a handful of paths and they are well articulated. And I just thought, like, I will never make it if I just sit at my desk and do research around securities litigation. No offense to our fabulous securities litigators, but that was boring to me,
Right.
a little bit inconsequential. And I just, so, I think I'm still that person. And frankly, I think if there's a takeaway here, it's look for people in your life who think that way and encourage them and support them, because there's a lot of, really interesting creative things that come from thinking a little bit differently.
Well, that's why that practice area, I think, it suits you so well. Well, I'm fascinated by both of your sort of descriptions about that, because I've been thinking about that a little bit more. It's not directly relevant to maybe what we're talking about, but can you see kind of your child inside you as you get older? And are you, of course you're older, you look older, you have, right, all of the things of getting older are there, and you have more experience, and all of those things, and there's good and bad from that. But I feel like I'm kind of the same as I was. The good things, the bad things. In my case, it was much more introversion, I would say, much more fear of sort of stepping out and sort of doing the things, Nausheen, that you were saying. That would have petrified me. I would have absolutely been out of that room. I wouldn't have been anywhere near that stage. So that's a completely different thing. But that's why I'm wondering, to bring it now to what we're talking about, and we have, let's say, business executives watching, lawyers. Many of them don't have that background. I could picture people saying, well, Nausheen, obviously, you have this fantastic personality, a charisma, you've got everything, well, you can see that, right? And I felt that when I watched the videos. So you have that, and that comes probably from, when you were younger and were wanting to be up on stage and do those things. But people might say, but that's not me. So how do I, can I speak, with impact at a board meeting or with a client or doing one of these, talks? Or am I not going to be able to do that because I don't have those kind of skills and experiences that you have?
Oh gosh, communicating well is absolutely a teachable and a learnable skill. Communicating with impact, like you said, which is the lovely title for this event. The idea really is to understand who it is that you're showing up as. I really don't think that extroverts have it easy, and I don't think extroverts make the best public speakers. A lot of great public speakers are famously introverts. They don't particularly get their energy from being around other people, but they believe in what they're talking about, and they've taken years to master the craft. So speaking in public, speaking on camera, speaking up in a boardroom, it's all about understanding what parts of your personality will make the most impact, will work the best in that scenario, and really amplifying them. If you have a good sense of humor and you think that that is what makes you memorable, bring that into the context of your next presentation. The idea is not the joke. The joke is not the result that you're aiming for. The result you're aiming for is your message to be memorable. The joke is the nice gift wrap that you're going to wrap your message in. It's as I believe, I'm forgetting the author's name, but there's a great book called Contagious, where the author talks about the message being hidden in the Trojan horse of a story. So the story is the way into the mind of your audience, and when you open up the story, that's what your message is that you want people to remember. So just stating the message is going to be way less impactful, way less memorable. Just knowing these things, understanding them, practicing them, and making them a part of your routine when you need to present just makes such a huge difference.
So rather than so kind of identifying strengths that you have within yourself, and then looking for ways to amplify those, and then wrap it into the story or the themes that you're trying to convey. Is that, you think that's a good approach for people that might not be used to, being on stage, or, doing theater or other things like you did?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at what are your natural strengths and what are the opportunity areas and blind spots. And this is, of course, where you can work with a coach, for example, or even if you have a mentor or a friend who can help you really objectively look at how you come across. So I even, for example, with my clients, I even do things like 360 peer assessments of their communication skills, where we send out this anonymous survey to their peers, their managers, their team, and even their friends and family. And we ask them, how does this person come across in different contexts? Do you think that they are approachable? Do you think they're confident? Do you see them being nervous? Do they talk too fast? What should they change about themselves, in your opinion, to become better communicators? So really creating that understanding is so important. And I often call it this journey from being extremely self-conscious, which is where a lot of us start off. We are very painfully self-conscious of how we look and how we're coming across. And very often that makes us either freeze or just not be fully ourselves. So that's your starting point, being painfully self-conscious, to developing a self-awareness and an awareness of others and an awareness of the room, which really helps you out. So you almost can, while you're in the moment, you can almost extract yourself from the moment and see yourself as speaking and observing the members in the room who are listening to you. And you start to develop this feel for whether they are with you or not, whether they're understanding, whether they agree with you or not. And then it becomes smooth sailing.
Oh, having that ability to sort of step outside yourself and kind of have the comfort level with what you're doing, so that you're able to then kind of observe. Desiree, I know with lawyers, I wrote about recently this idea of the curse of knowledge, which I think, infects a lot of professional, people, not just lawyers, but doctors and academics, other professionals. And it's this idea that you've taken so much time, thousands and thousands of hours, years and years, developing expertise in a very, technical area. And it's very hard to put yourself in the place of someone that doesn't have that knowledge. It's almost impossible psychologically, I think, to unlearn, what you've learned. And so when you're, presenting to a board of directors, or, to a client, or maybe you're an in-house lawyer or executive presenting to someone, you have so much information in your head, and you don't want to miss anything. So you're very fixated, a little bit different, Nausheen, than what you were thinking, where you actually want to be focused more on the audience and what they need, and how you can be sort of a vessel for conveying the essence to them so that they can take action. You're just jumbled. And I find that has been a problem for me. And I definitely see it a lot. Do you have that problem, Desiree, with you, or do you see that with lawyers that you work with, or other people when you're at board meetings, or talking with clients, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a perfect segue, because I think what Nausheen is describing applies to all of us. But then layered on top of that are certain professions where, yes, we have this kind of historical or intrinsic knowledge that impacts the way that we think we're supposed to communicate. And I think that's the critical nuance, that our view is that there is an expectation about how a lawyer should talk, what a lawyer should know. And we're constantly trying to live up to that instead of taking a step back and thinking about the practicalities. Like, we're all people. There are infinite ways that any one of us could engage, interact, could credibly talk, and still communicate an effective message. That's really where the space we need to kind of shift into. Not that, oh, I'm the lawyer in the room and I need to live up to the kind of lawyer expectation by demonstrating that I'm the smartest one in the room, that I know all of the problems. By the way, none of our clients want to hear all the roadblocks. They want to hear 1% roadblocks and 99% creative thinking to get around it, right? But we forget that as lawyers. We think like, oh my gosh, I have to scorch the earth with all of the risks so that I've done my job. Let's take a step back. Who are we serving? And this goes to Nausheen's point. Who's in the room? What actual purpose are you serving here as counsel or another nuanced role? Maybe you're an accountant, right? Maybe you're board chair, whomever you are in that room. What is the ultimate purpose that you're serving? What is the best thing that you could do here? And reverse engineer how to get there. How do I get that result? It's not necessarily by being the smartest, most technically perfect lawyer. It might be sitting back and listening and then inserting and communicating with impact when the time is right. Or it might be having a really relaxed conversation with a CEO who is equally relaxed or maybe very nervous, and you have to kind of match their energy with a counterpoint. There's so much more and so many more ways to serve than just your narrow area of expertise. But I think part of being able to get there, and Nausheen used this word, I think it's perfect, having confidence, right? Just being okay with who you are. If you have the noise of, I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, I'm going to say the wrong thing, I'm an imposter in this situation, how do you cut through that to then actually serve the sort of mission or fulfill the purpose of why you're there in the first place, why you were asked to be there? It's too much to weed through. And so I think, in some ways, kind of tearing it all down and coming back to a place with whether I'm an introvert, an extrovert, whether I speak clearly or tend to struggle in that area, let me just break this all down and come back to a place where I know I'm good enough. I certainly have the information that you need. My communication skills are unique to me. They're authentic to me. And I will communicate best if I'm coming from that place versus like layering on top all of the insecurities, the who I should be, what I wish I was. No one cares about that. They want you and they want your best you. How do you get there?
It's really hard to do that because, especially as you say, as lawyers, because you have this perception of what you should be or how you should talk, or I have to make sure I don't miss anything. So you tend to get in your head, and maybe that's true with other professions. I'm sure it is. But Nausheen, how do you get that? Because you're very big on that phrase that Desiree mentioned again, which is this idea of sort of confidence, having a sense of yourself and being comfortable that you're good enough, you have the right skills that you need. How do you develop that confidence or find it within yourself, if that's the better way to think of it?
By doing. So much of it is by doing, and then doing the hard thing while you're scared, and then looking back at it intentionally and giving yourself that talk, telling your negative voices that you did something that was super hard, giving yourself proof to believe in yourself for the next time. And this is why I really feel that speaking on stage or speaking in front of a large audience can be transformative, because it is something scary. It's you feeling vulnerable and almost powerless in front of a group of people that could make fun of you, judge you, criticize you. You often feel like, I don't belong here. I shouldn't be the one presenting this. Doesn't person X know more than me? Can person Y not express this better than me? Person Z is so much more senior than me. Shouldn't they be the one presenting? So first, just doing the thing without having the conviction, because the conviction will come later and the confidence will come later, and being okay with that. It's definitely a lesson I learned the hard way. And I, for the longest time, got really good at projecting this confidence without actually feeling confident on the inside. It took many therapy sessions for me to realize this, where my therapist pointed out that, Nausheen, are you one of those people who can really project this confidence, but inside you're just questioning everything and doubting your every move? And I realized that a lot of people are like that. We've learned to put on these faces, these masks, like Desiree was talking about. So it's good and bad. Being able to project that confidence outwardly, of course, can serve you well in many ways. But if you don't work on the inner confidence, then you're going to start feeling more and more like an imposter the more that you project it without really having the roots inside.
Of course, I guess, and by the way, we're getting some great comments. Elena has a great quote that we're probably familiar with, but it's good to remember, which is, be yourself, everyone else is already taken, and makes sense. And you hear that, but in a way, Nausheen, it kind of scares me a bit, because that does require you to, dig deeper. You talked about therapy or other ways, but you have to kind of know, who you are, I guess. And for some people, that's a very difficult thing. I think even doing this LinkedIn that I've been doing for, maybe 4 or 5 months only, I think it's a wonderful, training ground for things that I've been doing this a long time, but I hadn't really thought through a lot of the topics that we're discussing and that I've been writing about. Just having to write more concisely, be able to think in ways of how's your audience going to react to that. And, speaking, as I mentioned, the reason I think I connected with you was I saw these, really just captivating, engaging videos that you were doing. And you were, just able to, distill things down into their essence. I think you used to do, I still probably do, right? Your 3 things or your 5 things. And it's a great way to, present a complicated topic without overwhelming someone and, making them just click away. It gives them the feeling that I can do that. There's only 3 things. If I can just get these 3 things, maybe I can make a little bit of headway, and that will give me that little extra bit of confidence. And then maybe I can do another 3 things. And that feeling I got from you, is that why you do that approach? Is that something that you intentionally do when you're putting together your videos and posting?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The things that I talk about, the things I specialize in, are so overwhelming and intimidating for a lot of people. And I really don't want them to be. I like to think of myself as one of the biggest video supporters on the platform, where I really want to cheer everyone on who wants to make more videos. It doesn't matter if they suck, because they will. Eventually they will. Not eventually. Initially they will, and eventually they won't. I talk about watching yourself back, but to be honest, it's hard for me to watch my videos back from 7 years ago when I did my first TV appearances. They were awful, just awful. And it's painful watching it back. But then you tell yourself that you did it. Just like David, you were saying that, you've been doing these for 4 or 5 months. That means you're consistent and you're doing it. Maybe some days you don't feel like getting on a live. Maybe some days you watch yourself back and say, I could have done that better, or why did I stumble here? And you do it anyway. And that makes such a big difference. So yes, coming back to your question, absolutely. I want to make it simple, approachable. When people ask me, Nausheen, what camera should I get? What lighting should I get? Or when they tell me, Nausheen, I really want to make these videos, I'm just waiting till I have enough money so I can invest in XYZ. And those are all just positive procrastination excuses.
You get a
Because
ton of
to be
comments about
honest,
you get a ton of
yeah,
comments about the cameras, I noticed. And I do feel that
yeah,
it's almost like I need the perfect setup before
yeah.
I can do something, right? And I see you have a million of those. I don't know any of the technology, so I look at that and it goes over my head. But you usually very politely respond and say, "Oh, I have this camera." But I do wonder if any of those people are actually going to make the video, or it's just the preparatory
Exactly.
steps to do it.
We have the most, like, oh, I'm trying to show my phone, but we have the most powerful camera like in our pocket. Like, films have been made on this thing. So you really don't need much. The one thing I do advise people to get is a good mic, because good audio makes a lot of difference. But other than that, really, you can use natural lighting, you can use your phone, you don't need a fancy backdrop. To be honest, I have this because there's an ugly white wall behind me, and this was the only corner of my living room that I could use. So it was more out of necessity that I created this, and it became part of my brand. But you don't need anything fancy. And waiting to do it the fancy way means you are just going to be waiting for a long time. Why wait? Why not start now?
What would you say, since you mentioned it, and I do have to say I might have been able to track down a couple of those older videos. I don't have them to show, so I'm not going to do that. But I may have seen a few. But if you were going to go back and putting your coaching now that you said you just don't want to see them. You're just terrible. What do you not like about them? What would you have? What do you do now that you like much better than when you look back at those older videos?
Hmm. One of the older videos was this really strange indie film that my ex-partner and I was trying to make at the time. And like I was talking about audio, we had no idea what we were doing. So we started filming on this road trip, and we were filming in the car, and we didn't have an external mic. We had this nice camera that we bought, no mic, and we thought, that's fine. How bad could the sound be? It was terrible. It was so bad that when we were editing it, we had to dub over everything, and it just made it unwatchable. That was a very hard lesson that I learned. And later on in film school, I realized why. So I don't know if you're aware of this. This is this really interesting experiment that was done at some point, I want to say a while back, where they had two groups of people. Group one was shown a film that had poor quality visuals but really great audio. So the visuals would cut out at times, they would be blurry, you weren't able to see things clearly, but the audio was great, you heard everything. And group two was shown the same film, the visual quality was excellent and the audio was poor. They really couldn't hear the dialogue, it was fuzzy, people, it was just not a pleasant experience in terms of audio quality. And do you want to guess which one of those, out of those two groups, which group had more people leaving before the film was over?
Oh, really? The better quality, the better one had people leaving?
So there were two groups, right? One had better audio and worse video, and one had
Oh, I see. Yeah,
better
the better
video and
audio is
worse
more
audio.
the better audio is more important, right? It gives a better connection to the audience
Yeah.
than the video quality.
Yes. So the group that was watching the film that had really terrible visuals but great audio quality, they actually stayed through it. More people stayed through the film. But when you were showing them these beautiful, crystal clear visuals with terrible audio where you couldn't hear the dialogue, people just walked out. So that is really one of the things that you learn very early on as a film student, as a filmmaker, and people don't really realize it, that when we are watching something, audio is more than half of the game. It's more than half of the impact that you're receiving.
Well, I've seen that even, I guess you could take that even, Desiree, to what we do, where it's not so much, making videos or things like that. Although with the pandemic, we did have more, people doing things like we're doing now, talking on Zoom and, having to figure out how to look at a camera and do all that. But I notice, in addition to that curse of knowledge problem or issue that lawyers often have, or business executives when they're presenting to a board of directors or something, where you want to get everything out. You want to make sure you don't miss anything. And you tend to use jargon. You assume people know, what you're talking about when they really don't. You don't use visual imagery or stories, all of those things that make for kind of boring things. But the other thing I noticed, going to Nausheen's point, is audio, how you use your voice. At least for me,
Mhm.
I hopefully I'm not terribly monotone, but I do know that I think when I hear a lot of presentations at board meetings, it's not good. It's very, next I would like to talk about, and it's, and if audio is a critical part of sort of conveying your message, whether you're on a telephone or whether you're in person. Have you seen that, Desiree, as well, like with associates or lawyers that you've worked with? And is that something that you focus on in terms of how do you use your voice to convey gravitas, or to convey significance, or to keep people interested in what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think to keep people interested is the most important sort of the litany of choices. Absolutely, and I see it across, from associates to partners. And I do, David, as you know, a lot of work in our professional development department here at the firm. I don't think it can be overstated that being dynamic, that make the way that you choose to emphasize, the gestures that you use. I gesticulate a lot, and you don't necessarily have to do that if it's not authentic to you, but a little bit of emphasis, a little bit of movement, being thoughtful about the way that your cadence, the way that you land on certain words, is very important for communicating a message, and for ensuring that people are listening. A monotone talk that encompasses everything you needed to say is of way less value. And Nausheen, the experience is so interesting. Way less value than a very dynamic talk where you hit the key points, but maybe didn't cover, all 15 talking points. I would rather listen. I would rather be that speaker. And I think it's absolutely true for the entire audience. I'm seeing some great comments here, about kind of the way that people speaking resonates. And that's one of them, just being dynamic. And frankly, as a speaker, and I've said this before in a talk that I gave, like, and it aligns with what we're talking about. As a speaker, you're serving an audience, right? You're there to service the audience. And I agree with one of the comments that the audience is generally not there to criticize you or to cut you down. That, we're talking about professional settings where people are generally there to take something away for themselves. It's a professionally enriching experience. They're learning something. Maybe they're required to be there, or they've opted to be there. Either way, they're looking for the takeaway. So how do you deliver on that? And one of the ways is by being dynamic, right? Being in service to your audience by ensuring that they actually hear what you've said, because you've said it in a way that's interesting, that is a little bit unique, that captures their attention, that isn't too long. And you've given them something, right? We talk about the gift. You've given them this gift to walk away with. It's not 100 key points in a slow, monotonous voice. They'll never remember that. No audience member will ever take away anything from that, right? So much less all the points. So yes, I see it in our profession, but I see it across industries. There can be a lack of dynamism in speaking, and that will detract from your message much more than, I missed a point here or there.
Yeah, and Nausheen, we were actually kind of texting back and forth last night a little bit about PowerPoints, or using decks, which in the business world, hopefully you're out of that now. I don't think you don't have these, that's more of a Procter and Gamble, I imagine, type thing, where you go into meetings, and you're having I posted about a board meeting I was at with a terrific,
Yeah.
really well-known New York law firm that is great, and they have tremendous expertise and knowledge. But it was a 80-page plus deck, densely filled with information, and just plodding through it. And I think once people realized, I think they're really going to go through that, you could almost see how do we cut them off, and you get a stare of like, stop doing that. But sometimes you're so into yourself, you don't even see that stare. that the CEO may give you, or somebody in the room, like, okay, please, you're not,
Mm.
you're on slide 3. You're not going through 80 of those, right? And I do think that takes a lot of strength, though, because in order to get away from that, that's your security blanket. And I've certainly,
Mhm.
wrapped myself in those. The good thing is I don't actually know how to put together a PowerPoint. So it saves me from making bad ones, because I don't actually do it. I have to have somebody try to figure out how to do it. So it ends up a lot shorter. But, you wrap yourself around that and you think, if I have everything jammed in there, then if all else fails, I can simply start, reading. So you have to have the comfort to
Mm.
take it away. And then you also have to have the intellectual strength, courage, whatever, to make the decisions about what is important, because no one else is going to do that. And so I think it's a lazier approach to say, well, there's all these
Mhm.
tangential things, going, Desiree, to what you were saying. And in the law, there's a ton of those. There's always an exception. There's always a minor point that may be applicable and you want to mention it. But you can't do that
Mm.
if you're going to communicate with impact. So what do you think about, do you agree with that, I guess, Nausheen? And what are you thinking about using, notes or PowerPoints or other kinds of things like that when you're communicating?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. The PowerPoint should not be your crutch. It should be a tool. If you think that the PowerPoint is there for you to present, then you are simply reducing yourself to being a message delivery person. And you will be a poor message delivery person at that, because people can actually read much faster than you can talk. So if you have a slide full of all this information, people have already read the third point by the time you're done with the first, which means they're literally just waiting for you to get done. But instead, if you have this interesting graphic with a few words, if you have a picture that only you know the story behind, and you use it as a prompt, as a trigger for thought and reflection or curiosity, that makes it so much better. It makes the PowerPoint become a tool for you and not a crutch. And it really makes you more important than the PowerPoint, because you are not the PowerPoint delivery person. If that's the case, it should have been an email. You don't need to be there to present something in person necessarily. You are there to share your experience, to share your expertise, to share your opinion and your insights. So slides are great and they definitely have a place. I don't see them going anywhere. There are a lot of trainers that hate PowerPoint and they're absolutely against them. I'm not. And especially in a profession like yours, I don't think you can completely do away with them, but just changing the mindset from just relying on the PowerPoint to tell you what to say to the PowerPoint being this tool that you can use when you want to, and other times don't use it. Just talk as if you would just be talking to another person, and not you're not just not that you have to just stick to the PowerPoint and present the PowerPoint and that's your roadmap and that's it.
Well, the worst, Nausheen, is, and I've seen many of these, and Desiree, I'm sure you have too, and maybe I've been guilty of a few myself, but is the back, it's almost the back is turned, or you're sitting
Oh, yeah.
down and you're looking up at the screen, and you just go. And like I said, there
Mm.
may be even, people on their phone, they're drifting away, but you're oblivious to it all, because you're so, again, into yourself, and not in a negative way, but you think that's what you're doing, is conveying information, and it's your job. The other thing I found is, if you make 20 slides, you feel a compulsion to go through 20 slides. So it's, you
Mm.
you feel, so it's almost like you're creating a problem right from the start. I think what I like to do at meetings that sort of have some kind of a role, is to do as you say, which is, if you're going to do a PowerPoint, or I prefer a memo, an outline or memo or something, you get that out a day or two before, assume that people have read it, and whether that's a safe assumption or not, you're never sure, but most people do, who are diligent. So you assume that they've read it, and then you go in and you say, I assume you've read that. I gave you a lot of
Mhm.
information in the PowerPoint. Here are my 3 takeaways, and here's what we need to do today to act on those. and then you do those, that leaves plenty of room for people to, ask questions or, raise other points. But you, I think, are a little bit more focused on what the key takeaways are, and what, more importantly, I guess, what you're asking the person to do, with that information. So that, is it make a decision? Is it, approve a budget, or in my case, maybe a deal? But what are you asking the people to do? And then they're able to focus, at least I've found, on your talk more, because they understand
Yeah.
sort of where you're going, with the whole presentation. Otherwise, it's buried at the back, and they're not even able to, filter through what you're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You need to be very clear at the outset what it is that you want to accomplish, either by stating it, or maybe more interestingly, creating a question that kind of opens a door in the audience's mind. And you take them through the presentation like a story. You take their hand and you take them through this journey. And at the end, you close that door, or you walk through with them to the promised land, so to speak, whichever analogy works better. So that is also a very interesting way of retaining their attention throughout, while they still have this idea of this is eventually where we're going to end up.
Yeah, I like that. Well, you do that a lot of in your talks, where you sort of will give the idea of where you're taking people, and then you sort of
Mhm.
guide them, down that path, which I think is really engaging. Desiree, do you think that, I've always kind of thought litigators, the reason I focus this one on sort of corporate lawyers is, to me, litigators, who are in court, they seem more attuned to this. Maybe it's because of personality. That's why they gravitated to that. But, the litigators tend to be, more comfortable, I think. But you'll know better than I do about that. But my feeling is that, and I think there's also a little more attention paid. I don't know whether we do that, at the firm in terms of professional development or other things, but corporate lawyers, it's a much more insular kind of thing. You're not necessarily, in a courtroom or doing things like that. Have you found that are the litigator types who kind of gravitate toward that practice better communicators, more effective communicators than maybe the corporate lawyers are? Or is it really just individual, depending on, your particular skills and interests?
Yeah, I think it's a mindset question, because litigators, in a sense, are expected to be better presenters, right? Litigators are sort of thought of as trial lawyers, even though a lot of litigators don't have good trial experience. But that's the expectation, right? Like those who probably did moot court or some sort of a kind of trial practice type class in law school then become litigators. So you have more opportunity to practice. But I think it is a disservice to our corporate lawyers if they are under any notion that they aren't expected to be as dynamic and as refined of speakers as our litigators. Because frankly, on balance, the litigators are not in court very often, or at least in what we do, right? There are certain
Mhm.
industries like maybe personal injury where you're in court a lot more. But for kind of corporate litigation work that our firm tends to focus on, these are business disputes, and complex business disputes, and it will be years before anyone steps foot in a courtroom, if at all. So where are the speaking opportunities? They're in the interim, right? As a young associate, you are presenting your research to a partner. As maybe a mid-level associate, you're taking a deposition, or you're arguing just via telephone with your opposing counsel about why a certain deadline should be moved, or why their position is unreasonable. So there's a lot of opportunity to practice. I don't think it's any different on the corporate side, except that we're not oriented to thinking that way, or to thinking about the work that way. And what happens is that we then funnel our corporate lawyers into a place where they think their advocacy skills or their presentation skills are secondary to the binders that they're creating, or the contracts that they're reading. It's not true. And in fact, I think we could gain a lot of leverage by supporting our corporate lawyers in thinking about the way that they communicate and refining those skills, right? Maybe we avoid some of the fallouts that we see in disputes, or maybe we avoid the tense moments because all along someone has communicated effectively and clearly around their position. They've treated it in a way as litigation, not in an adversarial sense, but just that, every time I speak, it counts, and I want to be the best presenter I can be. So I think it's a mindset shift. And I think it's as important for our corporate lawyers to be articulate and dynamic and powerful speakers and understand how to communicate with impact as any litigator.
Yeah, I totally agree. Desiree, you actually make a great point. Nausheen, that goes into one of your main things, I think, right? This idea of intentionality, speaking as a leader. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I've read so much that you've written and done about that. And I think it's really an amazing sort of mind shift or framework for thinking about it. And if you're leading a board meeting or you're being asked to, make a impactful presentation or do something, you have to be intentional about how you're going to convey that information. And you talk about that in the context of leadership.
First of all, I want to say I love what Desiree said about making your voice count. And that is just such a great way of putting it. It's exactly what we're talking about and exactly what you just talked about, David. Speaking as a leader is not really about a title. That's why it's not speaking as a CEO or speaking as a boss. A lot of us have in-depth knowledge of our industry. A lot of us have a lot of years of experience where we've gone through so many successes, failures, misfortunes, things that other people can learn from. And yet, we don't learn how to tell our stories with maximum impact, with maximum memorability. And so, speaking as a leader is about stepping up and saying that I do have something to contribute, and I'm going to find the best medium to contribute in. I'm going to find the right messages to convey, and I'm going to do this consistently because I feel that I have something to offer that other people can benefit from. It also circles back to the whole curse of knowledge that you were talking about. And I swear, I think this has been like the curse of knowledge is a phrase that has been following me around this week. I saw it in your post and someone else mentioned it to me today. I feel like this is something we think about a lot, that something we take for granted can be something that someone else will look at and say, what? And that it can change the way that someone does something. It can have an impact on someone else's life. So speaking as a leader means recognizing and realizing that you can be a leader in something. You are leading with your experience that you've gained already. You're leading with the stories that you've lived through, and you're leading with the messages that you want people to remember. So why would you not want your voice to be heard? It's one of those realizations that I wish and hope more people would have. A lot of us, fortunately, have the fortune to have a voice, a literal voice. Why would we not learn how to use it and use it well?
Well, Nausheen, that's a great way, I think, to kind of wrap up where we are. Although we could do another one. I mean, I love it so much. But Desiree, thank you for all the things that you do on for our firm in terms of professional development and all the great programs that you do, and also just for the great story about your work and how you sort of intentionally pursued your career. I think is a great lesson for me and a lot of people. So I think that was terrific. And thanks also for obviously agreeing to come on with Nausheen and I.
My pleasure. I'm so grateful to be invited. And Nausheen, thanks for all of your wonderful insight. I will just echo that. Do not sit around and wait for somebody to tell you you're a leader. Designate yourself as a leader and go. No one is looking to pluck people to be leaders. It's all in your control. And I just, that was invaluable advice from Nausheen there. So thanks for including me in this great discussion.
Yeah, thanks. And Nausheen, for everybody who I'm sure people who have been watching that are like, who is she? Is she a lawyer? What is she? what are you doing? That's one of the things I've tried to do with this a little bit in the LinkedIn was to uh, kind of try to bring in different perspectives that may not be directly seem applicable to what we do, because I think as lawyers, especially if you've been doing this a while, you get very kind of myopic in your focus. You just get more narrow and narrow, and you have a tremendous energy, tremendous just enthusiasm for what you do. So I know you're going to be superbly successful working with your new
Oh.
coaching business and leadership. And people should definitely follow you on LinkedIn. And I know you're going to be doing a course coming up in February, I think you said.
Late Feb, yes, my boot camp.
Okay, great. So that, more information I assume you'll have on LinkedIn. But this was just fantastic. I mean, I'd love to do even another one at some point on other things. But your videos were just a tremendous inspiration to me as I was trying to make those videos, and standing right where I am now. Just my fiance Victoria, who helps edit the videos, she's probably was tired of the 27th take where I say, "Hi, this is David Edgar. Welcome to M&A in a minute," or something like that. And if you saw all those outtakes and then watching them back, as you said, extremely painful, but watching your videos and really feeling the enthusiasm, how you use your voice. I'll never be able to do that, but I don't think. But having that to kind of look at and watch was a big inspiration, I think, to kind of me trying to break out into these videos. So I thank you for that. Appreciate all the things that you're doing.
Oh, thank you so much, David. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for having me on and for this, wonderful LinkedIn event. I do want to say that even actors in Hollywood, on average, do 7 takes. So that's supposedly, at least how we were taught in film school, supposedly the Hollywood average. So if a Hollywood actor can take 7 takes to get something right, for sure we can take 15 or 20 or 30. Hopefully not 30. So it's absolutely normal. It's absolutely fine not to nail it on the first try. And something else that you said was really interesting. Just for me, I have a very interesting relationship with the legal field. I almost did become a lawyer. Very, very almost. I was very inspired to do it because my dad, who passed away when I was a kid. So, of course, I spent a lot of my life trying to get to know this person who wasn't alive anymore. He went to law school at one point in his life and ended up in government service. So one of the things I said to my mom at some point when I was a teenager was, "Mom, I want to go to law school just like Dad." And she said, "You're not going to last in law school. Why don't you do an internship instead at, a legal firm?" And I went one bright sunny day in the summer of, could have been 2004, to these legal offices to do my internship. And I was so excited and I was so happy. And I lasted 1 day. 1 day. It was all it took. I got so much homework. I got a peek into how much reading and memorizing I would need to do. And
Yeah.
I was like, no, not happening, not me. So I have immense respect for you guys because you've done it and you've really, jump through all those hoops and you're here at this point where you're doing these incredible things. So I really have a very interesting relationship with the legal industry, and I love that I was able to do this event. So thank you again so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, I didn't know, that was one thing I did not know. If you ever decide to go back to law school, you're hired, and we'll find a place. We'll find a place for you. But that just adds one more career. I do think that idea of finding things you love to do and knowing when you don't like it and moving on to other things. Your life is really an example of having that courage to do it. So no, I appreciate that. And for all the great questions, I'll try to go back and and respond to some of these. But I really appreciate everybody who who signed up and gave such great questions. And we tried to roll some of those in as we were talking. So Desiree, thank you so much. I know you had a busy day. I appreciate you doing this. And Nausheen, awesome that you responded to my random message on LinkedIn, and I'm really glad that you took the time to do this with us.
Thank you all. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks everyone for
Thank
the
you.
comments.
Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.